Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Heather Hamilton. I serve on the select board for the town of Brookline. And with me this morning are a few familiar faces to some of you, unfamiliar to others. We're hoping to change that this morning. So today's discussion will center around the faith communities in Brookline and what they're doing to help people during this very unprecedented time. So I want to acknowledge my other select board member, Raoul Fernandez, is in the house, and our state rep, Tommy Vitolo. Thank you very much for joining us. And I want to give the other panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and to talk about their organization. Then we're going to have a quick discussion amongst ourselves about the common challenges that we all face. And then we'll open it up to you, the public. We'll take your questions in a Q&A format. If you have any questions on how to take advantage of that, feel free to try to access the chat window or the Q&A located at the bottom of your screen, or simply raise your hand. Kathy Bisbee from BIG is helping us with the back end. So I know technology continues to be something that we're all learning on the fly. So thank you very much. The other thing that I do want to plug is our own town website. Remind those that we have, hold on, I'm finding the website right here. The COVID's town website is brooklinecovid19.com with all the latest information. And I do want to plug the safety net fund that the Brookline Center oversees. It's rounding out $300,000, but we have a ways to go because the need just grows as exponentially as COVID-19. So let's turn it over first to Reverend Jonathan Gasper.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Father Jonathan. I'm the pastor at St. Mary's in Brookline Village and St. Lawrence in Chestnut Hill. We also have a school, a parish school, with over 230 kids in it. That's on Harvard Street. And this past week, many of us celebrated some very high holy days. And for us as Christians, we celebrated the celebration of Easter. And at the beginning of the week, I recalled a passage from the scripture where Jesus tells his disciples to go into Jerusalem and to find this homeowner and to tell him that in your house, we are going to celebrate the Passover with Jesus and his disciples. And as I reflected on that with our community this week, last week, I couldn't help but think how appropriate it was to hear those words that even though we're distanced because of measures that are rightly in place because of COVID-19, this technology that we're using even today and the internet have kept our community close together. It's something that we're not used to doing, but right from the very beginning of the Christian community, we knew that the Christian community gathered in homes and worshiped in people's homes. So we've had to catch up in a relatively short period of time. And thankfully, there are much smarter people in my community than I that have helped me to learn how to use social media and the internet in these ways. So we're streaming every day from our church, from our chapel. We've had really good attendance. Even people who have stepped away from the church or people who have physically moved away from our community have found ways to reconnect to our community. So I've been receiving beautiful notes from so many people who are reconnecting to their faith tradition because of the means of technology that we've been employing. Our sacramental life as Catholics is very much an in-person reality. It's something that we don't do virtually. It's hard to do it virtually. So things that we can do, we are continuing to do. So confessions, we hear confessions by appointment only. We're celebrating funerals, and as many of you know, there have been a lot of funerals, and I've had almost a funeral a day, but in a very new way that we're celebrating funerals where not going to the funeral home or to the church for a mass, but rather meeting the family, very few of them, at the cemeteries to bury their loved ones. And anointing of the sick, which is whenever possible and whenever PPEs have been provided for us and for me and for the priests in the rectory, we've been able to visit people who are sick and mostly dying with the virus. So that's been keeping us pretty busy. As I mentioned, we have a school, and we closed school on Friday, March 13th. And I'm really proud to say that we were able to open school again virtually through online and distance learning on Monday morning. So we made that transition relatively quickly, and I was really proud of our faculty, our staff, and our principal, Dr. Teresa Kirk, for really spearheading that and making that happen. So it's been a rough transition for some of the families. I know how hard it could be for parents and who are still working, but that's gone over relatively smoothly. Sunday school is picked up a few weeks ago. We're meeting for 30 minutes before our Sunday Mass, and we have just activities for our young people to be doing with their families. And we follow up with a virtual coffee hour, which I stole from St. Paul's. I saw St. Paul's was doing that. It's a great, fun way to connect with our parishioners. I'm doing cooking shows. I'm trying to keep engaged. I find that the thing that is key is communication with our parishioners right now, especially to those who are living alone, who are in that high risk category, and that we're really concerned about. So we coordinated a phone bank. We had over 40 volunteers call every single one of our parishioners, and that was received well. Just a wellness check to see how everyone was doing. And finally, I know I'm probably going over my time. Our young people have really stepped up to the plate in a time where we're all concerned about them missing out on senior prom and all of their activities at the end of the academic year. A group of our high school students who were supposed to have been in Corpus Christi, Texas this week on a mission trip decided that they would, rather than spend their April vacation at home, they were going to do a virtual mission trip. So what they've been doing is delivering face masks and groceries to many of our elderly parishioners. So it was a wonderful thing to witness, and such a ray of hope and light in the midst of real difficult days. So thanks for giving me this opportunity to share with you all, and I hope and pray you're all staying healthy and well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing all of that very good information. It's hard to not be aware of what's going on, so that it's tempting to lose faith. So by being more aware of what other people are doing in the face of all of this, I think will hopefully restore people's faith and hope. So next, let's go to Rabbi Claudia.
Thank you so much, Heather, for having me, and it's wonderful to be with all of you in this way. As you can see, I have a new coworker who comes with me to work every day. She's very busy there in the back, and that's part of my reality and the reality of so many of us that have young children at home. And yesterday we learned the news that this is not ending until the end of June, at least. So I'm still wrapping my mind around that and how that looks like, and how we work around that, especially for families that I think it's a representative in my congregation of two working parents that are trying to juggle everything. So just putting that in the context of trying to do this work. But a lot of us Reverend Jonathan said before, I think a lot of the work we're doing is about reaching out and being connected with our community in all the possible ways that both technology and in person allow us at this time of physical distancing. Very early, I thought about, people were talking about social distancing, and I was like, no, let's call it physical distancing, because the opposite is true. Hopefully we're bringing ourselves connected to one another, and during this time, so we're physically distant but virtually connected. That's what we it's kind of the slogan we have been using. And there are so many things that we're trying to do. We have started every morning a check-in at 9 to 9:45. We have what we call Boker Tov TVZ, Good Morning TVZ, where we have prayers, morning prayers. In those morning prayers, we have especially prayers for healing, where people can share what they're praying for. Prayers for mourning, where we can mourn those who have passed away from COVID, but also deaths that are continue to happen, and that it's so hard to mourn when you are not actively in community. And we actually end all those meetings every time with breakout rooms where we can divide in small groups and check in with each other. And that has been very powerful, because one of the things I realized is that there is a lot of people alone in our community, people that are alone in their homes, and trying to tackle what does it mean to be alone today, and how we can connect with each other. I think the most central part of the work we're trying to do is around chesed, as we call it in Hebrew, which is loving kindness or compassion, and which is really to reach out to every member of our congregation. We also did phone calls and made sure that every member of our congregation will get a phone call very early. And now we have launched, a few days ago, we have launched a new effort. It's called Chesed Beyachad, where we have divided our 380 households community into 20 subgroups, and we have leaders for each of them that will making calls and making sure to check on them specifically and to see who needs what. We have organized ourselves to bring food to those who cannot go, to take food to those who cannot go grocery shopping, to go for physical distancing walks if you need to have some company while walking apart. And it's been an incredible effort of our lay leadership. Actually, one of the panelists is, one of the attendees is the main leader of this effort of really organizing our community to take care of each other in these ways. There's so much more, and I would say that it is all connected about finding ways to be together in worship and in ritual. We have figured out how to do more Shiva, like our prayers for mourning when someone passes away on Zoom, or do funerals. I've been able to do funerals physically, be there in the cemetery, but stream them and have people participate in those ways. We had organize all the therapists. Our community has a lot of therapists together to figure out a way of how to support each other, because they are supporting so many others. So that we have brought them together to have this kind of conversation. And I will add one more thing. I will add two more things, and then I'll stop. One is I have focused a lot of my work on making phone calls. Here is my phone, like a real phone, which I think before this, I didn't use it that much. And now I am making sure to, every morning I make a list of who are the first few days, it was 20 to 30 calls a day. Now I'm making sure that I make 5 to 10 calls a day to check in on people directly and hear their voice and see if there's anything we can do for them. And then we're trying to also make sure we're expanding our resources and what we can do to help those most in need. I think it's very important to remind ourselves that we are blessed, that we have homes to shelter in, we have computers and internet access to do all this work. I'm incredibly blessed. My daughter she's in a private school. She has school from 9 to 3, my older daughter, every day. My husband is teaching also in Zoom from the house. We have all these blessings. We are both receiving our salaries monthly and can afford what we usually afford. So we are actually trying to say, those of us who can and have this support, to support others, to support financially others, to support your cleaning person, even if they are not coming to your house, to support the local businesses that are closed in any ways you can, and also to volunteer if you can. We had people organizing a volunteer on Chelsea, bringing food to people in need. We're very connected to Family Children Jewish FJC, and as I always get it wrong, Family Jewish Children Services, bringing food to people. So also physically volunteering when possible with a physical distancing. So not to only stay within our community, but see how we can spread our resources, our capacity, and the blessings we have to those who do not have that. I'll stop there. I have more, but I'll stop for now. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to give you opportunity number 2 to get the rest in. Reverend Jeffrey Melo, would you like to go next?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Heather, and thank you, everybody, for having us. I sort of just want to take a deep breath. As you've seen with Father Jonathan and Rabbi Claudia, there's been an explosion of what communities of faith are able to do in this time. And while I find the need overwhelming at moments, I give God great thanks that I'm in a job and a vocation where we can respond in a time such as this. And I find, in addition to all the liturgical we're on, we check in with our community every morning on Facebook Live. We end every day with a prayer service at 8:30. We're doing Sunday school 3 times a week just to give students time to connect, but also parents some time to breathe. This is a time that it's just hard on everyone. So there's not one community or one segment of the population in communities of faith that aren't struggling to figure out how to make meaning in this time, and how even just to face the day that's in front of them. So that's really where all the communities of faith in Brookline are focused, is just trying to respond to the needs of our people. And what I want to say to folks who might be watching is, if you've never been a part of a community of faith, if you've left a community of faith and you're unsure, there's a community of faith in Brookline for you. And we are blessed with incredible colleagues in the Brookline Ecumenical and Interfaith Clergy Association. So reach out if you're struggling, if you feel alone, if you just want to connect, if you want to find people who are getting together and talking about how to face this time, and how to make meaning out of what feels like pure chaos. Whatever faith tradition it is, please know that we are blessed in Brookline with a great, great community of faith. I want to say that at St. Paul's Brookline, we're trying to pay attention to what this time is revealing about injustices that have always been part of the world, but that this time is highlighting the iniquities in healthcare for people of color, income disparity, food insecurity. All of these things were present and among us in Brookline before this happened, but pandemics have a way of highlighting those things. So we're trying to respond. We're doing some outreach with the unhoused in Boston. If you are homeless right now, because the restaurants are closed, you have no place to eat, you have no place to use the restroom, you have no place to get a drink of water. And so the unhoused and marginally housed among us are really struggling. And because they are also a tight-knit community, this pandemic poses a great risk to them. So we're trying to pay attention to the people who are on the margins in this time and figure out how we can be there best for them. St. Paul's is also blessed to house one location of the Brookline Emergency Food Pantry. Visits to the food pantry have tripled in this time, and the amount of volunteers have diminished because a lot of the volunteers are folks who prior to this time would have been retired and are now in high-risk categories and ages. So the food pantry is doing incredible work keeping our neighbors fed. So there's another volunteer opportunity, whether that's getting them food or getting them financial resources. And then, you know, as the Safety Net Fund can attest, clergy are often the channel that people find their way to the safety net. People come to us seeking financial resources. We do what we can, and then we're very, again, blessed to be in Brookline, where there is a resource like the Safety Net Fund where people can get more help than we might be able to provide at the parish level. So I think, and you know, if folks are curious about specifically programs at St. Paul's, they can find us online on Facebook or stpaulsbrookline.org. But what we really, I think, as clergy leaders in Brookline want you to know is that you're not alone, and that there are folks out there who are ready and willing to walk this time with you.
Thank you so much. And we'll get back to the food pantry and food insecurity in a minute. But I want to give another opportunity to Rabbi Mendy.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for the Reverend, the Father, and Rabbi spoke so beautifully. I just want to start by obviously saying the obvious, how blessed we are to live in a town like Brookline for so many reasons. And sometimes when life is good and everything is normal, you take for granted the special things that you have and the people that look out for you and for the vulnerable. And Brookline is a special place on so many levels, and people feel safe here and they feel looked after. And that's something that we could hopefully add to. But I think the first thanks goes to the town and to Heather for arranging this meeting, and the great honor to be here. You know, us rabbis, us leaders, faith leaders, we love having people in our community. We love the social connection. But the truth is, as a Jew, we've always been taught that Judaism really and faith starts at home, actually. And you find God wherever you want and could. You can pray and connect to God wherever you are. And I think that's something that's very important for all of us to remember and think about now, is that although we might not be able to be physically together, and as Jews, we always have a quorum to pray together, might not have that, but we could still be praying and we could still be acting upon our faith and being positive and looking after those that are most vulnerable. We're coming from Passover now, which is a time when we think about becoming free and leaving our limitations and our boundaries. And it doesn't just mean physical ones. It can mean emotional and psychological ones and spiritual boundaries. And I think that, you know, every time God gives us a challenge, he gives us a medicine for a way to deal with it. And social media and Zoom and all these other things have given us the opportunity to really think about the things that we value and the things that are important to us and to connect as a community. We've been blessed that right after we had to close our temple, which was the Saturday, I think, of the 17th of March or 16th of March, right afterwards, on that Sunday morning, we were able to have a virtual Hebrew school, which connected to our international headquarters in New York. And we had 50,000 students from all over the world studying together. And we've been doing this every Sunday. It's just showed us how small the world is and how a challenge like a pandemic doesn't discriminate by color or by wealth or anything like that. And it was able to unite us in a way we never felt we could. I try to be on social media every day and have a YouTube channel on Facebook and give a Torah thought. And as many of the leaders said it, I try to call at least 20 people a day. We were able to give out Passover kits to 300 families and make sure that 100 families had dinners for Passover they couldn't have. And every Friday we try to do that. In fact, this Friday, we're having a pickup at the temple where people could get challah and chicken soup for the quarantined soul, and they could just come by and someone will put it into their car, just to keep people connected and remind people that we're not alone. And I think it's important to remember that when we speak about the vulnerable now and those that are hurting, it doesn't have to be people that can't afford to pay for things. It doesn't have to be people that necessarily can't find work. They could be vulnerable because of their health, because of their age, or just because they live alone, they're widowed, or they're not married and they don't have children near them. And just for example, I went to a neighbor a few doors down and rang their bell and then stayed back and gave them my cell number and checked in if we could pick up their medicine or if we could pick up their groceries. And they were fine, but a couple in the 90s, but they were so touched that someone thought of them and someone cared for them, even though they weren't part of our congregation. And I think we have to break those boundaries and recognize that we're here to help each other, no matter where we belong to, no matter what faith we belong to. We're all God's children. God loves us all. And we have to be there for each other. And I'll just finish with one more thought, is that in Judaism, we say there's a quote that says, Tracht gut wird sein gut, which is actually Yiddish, which means think positive and it'll be positive. And the mystical rabbis tell us that it's not just a wish, but it's actuality, that our thoughts, the way we think, and the positivity we bring to our faith and to our trust in God actually affects the outcome and affects how we are. And I think that it's important that, as difficult as it might be and as challenging as it might be, that we keep our faith and we keep our positive attitude and we keep our hope, and that hopefully we get through this together. I know a couple of you mentioned before about being home with your child. Well, guess what? I'm a father of 10 children, and many of them are young, and they're all home. And thank God we have a nice home, but it has been challenging just getting a tablet for everyone or getting them a room or a quiet corner where they could study. I feel like I tell my wife we get up at 6 a.m. and by the time it's 10 a.m. when we got everyone onto their channel or onto their Zoom, I feel like I need a nap already, and then the day just starts. So I think we have to find our blessings and be strong together. And I just want to thank all of you for coming here. And of course, if there's anyone that needs to reach out, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, where I have a physical address, phone numbers, our cell numbers are available, and we're always happy to help. And God bless all of you, and God protect the world and bring healing and health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will get to some of the points that you brought up in a minute, especially meditation. But I want to give an opportunity to Jonathan Kline, who's part of our Brookline Complete Count Committee, along with Raoul Fernandez and Tommy Vitolo after that. So Jonathan, why don't you talk about the census?
Thank you. This feels a little bit out of place among all these wonderful faith leaders, but I'm Jonathan Kline. I'm actually a member of Rev Claudia's congregation, and it's nice to see her here. And I'm a member of the Brookline Census Complete Count Committee. And my job on that committee, and we're doing what it sounds like, trying to make sure that Brookline counts all its members, my job on that committee is to reach out to faith communities. So I asked Heather for the opportunity to speak to you very, very briefly and remind you about the census and ask you if you're interested in following up with your congregations and getting more information, that you contact me. And I will put some information in the chat with my email address so that you can contact me, and also some resources about the census that you can use to distribute in your community. Rabbi Mendy, you, as you said, you had 10 children. I thought, wow, that's great. I hope they're all being counted on the census, because it's important that we count everybody in Brookline. And surprisingly, one of the most undercounted populations are kids. Sometimes people, when they're filling out their census forms, don't think about kids, and they especially don't think about babies, new babies in their households. So that's a real risk of undercount. There are lots of communities that are at risk of undercount. You know, there are the typical ones you would think of immigrants and people without documentation and people who don't have good English language skills. Also people who may be doubled up, people who are homeless or unhoused right now, or people even doubled up. Some people are scared or nervous about reporting how many people live in their household in the census because they're afraid they'll be caught by their landlord or someone else. It's really important to know that the census is completely confidential. It's one thing we can actually have a lot of faith in about our government. The census is a black box, and the information that goes out can't be accessed by the president, by Congress, by your landlord, by your local government. It's really just there for purposes of the count. And it is so important because the federal dollars we get in Brookline, how we're apportioned, how we get congressional seats, all of our political expression is really governed by how many of us there are. And that's why the census says not all citizens, but all human beings, all people get counted. So I'm going to stop now because I think I've taken enough time here, but I urge you to make sure that you are communicating with your communities about the importance of filling out the electronic census when they get it. That's happened already. If they haven't done that, filling it out in paper when it comes out to them in paper. If they think they haven't been counted, get in touch with me and I'll put them in touch with the right people to make sure they get connected. It's really important that we count every single person in our community. So thank you. Thanks, Heather, for inviting me and allowing me a little bit of space for this little advertisement in the middle of these much more important and weighty matters about making sure our communities stay together.
Well, I would say it is directly related to the discussion we're having here today, which is, the macro level, humans and how we traverse our lifetime and how we all connect to each other. And this is it's so important that it was actually written into the Constitution. The census is dictated by the Constitution. That's how important it is. So I will give my colleague, Raoul Fernandez, an opportunity to say a few words, and then followed by State Representative Tommy Vitello.
Great. Thanks, Heather. And thanks for the invite to be here. I think this is absolutely terrific. I appreciate everyone that's spoken so far. It says something really important about community and how community is so essential to our lives that we will find any way to be in community. And we've all found ways. It's clear you've all found ways to provide community virtually for people who need it most. It's also, I think, a reminder that there are those people who are being reached now who aren't the folks that can always make it to places in person, people that are locked in their homes for other reasons before COVID, and they're being reached now in a way that maybe they haven't before. They're being reached by our government in a way they haven't before. They're being reached by faith communities and others in a way that they haven't before. And I think it's really important to recognize that we've got to figure out ways to continue what we're doing now, even after this is passed, because those people are still going to need the kind of community that's being provided right now. And then the last thing I want to say, building off of Jonathan's comments, is all those vulnerable populations that he mentioned that are difficult to count in the census, those are also the folks that need the most support right now as well. And I'm really glad that you all are helping to provide that support and that our safety net is available and hopefully reaching folks that need that kind of support. And just to say, the thing I'm most proud of is that in this providing this safety net, we've taken this whole community approach, which means that, yes, it's available for Brookline residents, but it's also available for our MECO families who are connected to us through the schools. It's also available for small business owners and employees who work in our community and are part of the fabric of our community. And it's available to anyone regardless of documentation status. And that is the kind of whole community approach that makes me so proud to be part of this Brookline community. So again, thanks to everybody for all you do, and excited to hear the rest of the conversation.
Excellent. So State Representative, would you like to go next?
You bet. Good morning, everyone. There are actually 5 very quick things I want to say aloud. The first is, I want to acknowledge how challenging this is for the parishioners, for the people who go to service every week, once a month, however often they go, and who really do feel a strong sense of physical as well as spiritual community when they go. I attend Mass not every week. I apologize, Father Jonathan. But when I attend Father Jonathan's Mass, my favorite part of the Mass is the peace offering. And that's when the parishioners turn to each other and offer of peace. And that's when the hugs and the handshakes and the cheek kisses happen And it's when to complete strangers, to people who I didn't sit next to last week. And it's the way that we express in a very physical as well as spiritual way our community. And we can't quite do that right now. And so it really is, for many members of our community, an important loss. And I think it's important to acknowledge it. I also want to acknowledge the religious leadership in this town, and in many communities across the country, but not all. It is hard for these religious institutions to say, we're closed this weekend. Our doors are closed. Now, our virtual doors are open, our hearts are open, but you can't come to our building. And these are thousands of year old traditions. This is a big deal. And for these religious institutions to say, we believe in God, and we believe in science, and we believe in public health, and we're going to do the things that keep people safe, both religious and not, because it's the immediate important thing to, and not every religious institution in this country has done that, but ours have. And I think it's really important to acknowledge how hard that was, how much bravery that took, and how important that was. I want to acknowledge the select board, who has had so many Zoom meetings. I've only been on a few of them, really helping to bring different folks in the town together, including sub-communities that we don't often think of from a government perspective. And I think that's really important. So thank you for that. I also want to acknowledge Brookline Interactive Group, who has worked so hard to allow folks who are in television land, who are in Zoom land, who are on YouTube land, to all participate in whatever screen that they have. And the last thing I do an awful lot. This is me, Tommy Vitolo, 617-872-8921, tommy.vitolo@mahouse.gov. You call me anytime, you send me an email anytime. I will get back to you just as soon as I can with whatever help I can offer. And that's not just during COVID-19, that's all the time. So I actually, that's all that I wanted to get off my chest. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Big. And thank you to our religious leaders for being here this morning. Heather, back to you.
Thank you so much. Just a quick check-in, because a few of our panelists will have to drop off a little bit before 11. So I'm just wondering how many any questions in the Q&A that are burning before we do facilitated dialogue?
We don't have any questions in the Q&A. We do have about 7 attendees here, though.
Great. So if anybody wants to still submit some questions, we'll get around to it in just a moment. But there were 3 things that I wanted to address before people have to hop off. One was food insecurity, and what have you seen? What are your organizations doing directly? I know Reverend Melo talked specifically about the Brookline Food Pantry, but we are going to see a huge uptick in this. So just want to get people's thoughts on what they're seeing, what their organizations are doing, and what you're encouraging other people to do.
I just want to make sure that folks know that the food pantry has expanded exponentially in the last couple of years, first becoming its own 501c3. So it's its own independent program now, having started at St. Paul's, but it now has a location not just at St. Paul's, but on High Street and also down at Egmont. So there are 3 locations where folks can get access to the food pantry now. So if folks didn't know that, I wanted to make sure that you did. You can donate to the food pantry either by going directly to their website, brooklinefoodpantry.org. There it is, brooklinefoodpantry.org. And remember that $1 given to the food pantry is more than $1 worth of food brought to the food pantry, because the food pantry can take that $1 to the food bank and get much more. It goes a lot further at the food bank. So financial resources are always need. Our new regulations also on the webpage for how to drop off food. They're now doing drive-by food drop-offs, socially, physically distant food drop-offs for some items that are particularly challenging for them to find. So I would tell everybody just to go to the food pantry website.
Excellent. I was on a call very much like this a couple weeks ago, and we heard directly from the food pantry folks that that dollar of donation actually turns into about $10 of what they can buy purchasing power. So donations are always sought. Anybody else have any comments?
Yeah, I would like, first of all, I need to leave in a couple of moments, and I apologize for that. But I want to talk to the food insecurity. First, to say that, Reverend Jeff, we have made sure that actually the food pantry website is in our weekly happenings every week, saying to invite people to donate, so to be able to help by donating. I think it would be, I'll reach out to you after, because we are asking, a lot of people are asking how to volunteer. So I would like to see what are the best ways that we could volunteer and offer people to volunteer at the food pantry. I think that would be a wonderful way for us to stay connected and to help those others. I think part of, Heather, your question of how we're reaching out, I think we're going to see this. This is long term. This is now, like the first few weeks, we were all in emergency mode, day by day, trying to figure out. And I think by now we have all understood that this is for the long haul, both immediate, the next couple of months, and most importantly, the next few years, to trying to figure out people who have lost their jobs, things are going to change drastically for so many in our communities. So part of what we're trying to do is to have a sense of where people are. I am in contact with people where I'm realizing that they might be in challenging financial situation. As some of you said already, I try to help here and there with what I can. I need to learn a little more about the safety net fund, both so we can donate, but also to send people to eat and to figure out how we can support our communities as much as possible. But I think part of this is to figure out, to really be able to talk one-on-one and connect with people, understand where they are. People have a hard time asking for help, and that's totally understandable. So I see part of our job is to go to people and say, it is okay to ask for help. We are here for help. You are giving me an opportunity to do something by helping you. And I think that will be part of a lot of the work we will need to do in the many months and probably years to come, to say to people, we are here, please let us help you. I hate talking about silver linings because this is so challenging and horrible, but I think that the way that we're connecting to each other in such deep ways will pay off. And hopefully we will be able to be stronger and be with each other in ways that are that we weren't until now, that we were trying to, and we were sometimes being successful. Hopefully now we have strengthened that much more, and we will be able to support each other through the times to come. And again, I apologize that I have to leave. Today's Earth Day, and I'm running to another Zoom meeting to celebrate Earth Day today. So thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here.
Well, thank you for coming. And I also want to thank you for your service as a firehouse chaplain.
Thank you. Together with Father Jonathan and Reverend Jeffrey Melo, the three of us are the firehouse chaplains. It's good to be here with my fellow chaplains.
I always learn something new.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Heather and Kathy, for hosting this, and Raoul and Tommy for your service, and Jonathan, always thank you to you and to my colleagues.
Thank you. I did want to talk about, I guess I call it meditation, but Rabbi Mendy basically said, you sometimes can manifest a positive outcome just, with keeping positive thoughts. So just wanted to have a brief discussion about what that looks like to the rest of you.
I'll just jump in if you don't mind, because I have to jump out of this call very, very shortly.
Mm-hmm.
When we reflected on Easter, we often think that Easter as Christians was this, wonderfully peaceful event. But if you read the scripture account, you know that the scripture recounts that there was an earthquake and that the disciples were filled with fear. And I think a lot of our community right now, and many of us too, are surrounded by fear and by what the unknown is. It's sort of like the earth under our feet has shooken. We're not on the same ground that we were even a month ago. I have found personally, and I've heard this from members of our community, that their prayer life has changed. They have new routines for prayer, where life is not as frantic as it was before. We're spending a lot more time in our homes and with the people that we love. They've explained, and I've experienced it myself, a much deeper sense of communion with God and community with each other when we're doing public liturgical prayer. I've just found it's prayer that has kept us rooted and has kept me rooted in the midst of sort of the earthquake that we're experiencing right now in these unsettled times. And prayer doesn't make all of our troubles go away. God doesn't come to erase the challenges, but he comes to fill them with his presence. And that has been a tremendous source of hope and encouragement for me and for our community. So, I hope that'll be the experience for all people. Thank you. Thank you all for hosting this, and Heather and Kathy, and to my colleagues in the clergy, and Tommy, and give my best to Angelina and Raoul. Thank you so much for your work on the select board. Thank you all.
Thank you for coming.
Off the meeting now.
Yeah.
Have a blessed day.
Bye-bye.
If I could just say a few words, thank you, Father, and to all of you for your words and help. But, we're always focused on how important our action is, and sometimes about how important our speech is. But we don't realize how much our thoughts matter and are important, not just for us, but for those around us and for our relationship with God. In the Bible, it says that you have to love God. And Maimonides, the great philosopher and doctor, says, how could you be commanded to love God? Isn't love a feeling? And Maimonides says that the commandment is really to meditate and think about all the good things and great things that God has done in this world. And when you meditate and think about that, you will naturally come to love God and to have a relationship with him. In Judaism, a big idea is that prayer is sort of what you ask for. The word in Hebrew is tefillah, which means to connect. And the idea is that the real thing we do when we pray and we meditate is to know that we have a relationship with God. It's about connecting. It's not necessarily about asking what you need. It's not necessarily always about getting what you need, but it's about knowing that we have a relationship with the Almighty, and that he's connected to us and cares for us and loves us. And that's why I think that our thought process and our positive thought has a real outcome on who we are and actually on what happens. So I hope that together and through all the kind words that were shared here and all the caring and love, and that we're able to convey this to our congregations and to our people, that if they find a corner in their home and they meditate and they talk to God and they think positive, that they have a relationship. And it's important that they know they're never alone, even when they can be at the congregation, even when they can be with their pastor or their rabbi or at the town or at the library or anywhere else. There's always a way they could speak to God and connect to him, and how much he loves them and loves all of us as his children.
If I can add too, thank you, Rabbi Mendate. First of all, you having 10 children makes me such an underachiever in this day. I'm looking at the rest of my day in a very different lens. So there's that. But I also want to say that I think one of the things that I want folks to hear and to know is there's no right way to go through this, right? And I think that one of the things we can actually really do for each other is to let go of that myth that we've got it under control and we're doing it 100% exactly as we'd like to 7 days a week. We're just not. And if you are spending an hour of your day baking delicious crackling sourdough bread, that's awesome. I think that's great. If you are curling up with a book and a cup of tea and hibernating on the third floor of your house where nobody can find you, that's okay too, right? Like, I think one of the things that God constantly tells God's people is wherever you are, I'm there. So you can't control that. We can't control whether or not God reaches us. What we control is whether or not we're open to understanding where God might be in the midst of our chaos. So what I'm finding on Facebook is that we're given these two options of either nightmares or dreams. My day is either a complete nightmare or an absolute dream. And I don't know about most of you, but most of my days are somewhere in between, glimpses of dreams and little bits of nightmares. And I think if we continue to love one another and reach out to one another and say, where are you today? I'm struggling. Tell me a little bit about how you got through your day yesterday. Or, gee, I'm having a good day. Let me share my joy with you. I'm a little nervous that Facebook and social media, particularly among clergy who are incredibly competitive. Don't let us fool you. We are an incredibly competitive bunch, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. That can really wear you down at the end of the day. So unplug, know that you're doing exactly what you need to be doing, reach out if you need help, and let's just be a little bit gentler on ourselves and our expectations for excelling or getting an A+ on this time.
Thank you so much. As somebody who also represents many people in the public, I definitely sometimes feel the pressure where you're expected to have a lot of the answers and, to be the guidance. And when you're yourself struggling, it's very difficult to provide that stability to others. So I completely understand where you're coming from. This has been a great conversation. Thank you all for participating. I think I've checked the Q&A and we still don't really have any. So why don't we just end on a good note? Thank you all again. This was a very productive conversation. I hope people got something out of it. Anybody want to offer one last word?
I just want to say thank you again to Heather and Kathy and to everyone that helped this happen. And I want to say one last thought that I always tell my congregation, which is that sometimes instead of telling God how big your problems are, tell your problems how big God is. And it's something to think about, and sometimes a shift of attitude and mind that allows us to hopefully cope with the challenges and grow through them and become better people. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for that very interesting perspective. And a big thank you to Big, for whom, we could be trying to do this, but, we wouldn't be able to share it with others. Communication has been the word of the month.
Thank you, Heather Hamilton, for organizing this as well. We really appreciate the work that you're doing in the community. So thank you, Heather.
Excellent. And for anyone in the community, feel free to reach out to any one of us with any questions or to help get directed to resources. We will do what we can. So thank you all and enjoy the rest of your Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.